Hi, I'm Helen. Welcome to Helen's House and Garden. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make vegetarian Cornish pasties. The first thing you need to do to make Cornish pasties is to make a short crust pastry. I've made this short crust pastry by hand, but you can put it into a food mixer or a food processor, and that does make the whole process easier. I've weighed out 125 grams of butter, and what I'm going to do is cut it up into small cubes. And the reason I'm doing this is because it's going to make it easier for when we actually add the flour and try and rub the butter into the flour. You don't have to be precise with this, the cubes just need to be fairly small. All I'm doing is cutting the big block into slices, and then that slice into several sticks, and then the sticks into tiny cubes. So just work all the way through the block of butter until you've cubed the whole lot. I'm making this short crust pastry suitable for vegetarians, so the suet I'm going to add is vegetable suet, and as you can see it's already been pre-shredded. Now I'm going to have to catch you up here. I hit record on my camera, so I thought, and I lost a bit of footage. All I've done is got a large mixing bowl and put in there 500 grams of strong bread flour. To that I also added 1 teaspoon of salt, and then the 125 grams of butter which we chopped into cubes, 120 grams of the vegetable shredded suet, and then I just mixed all the ingredients by hand really loosely, covering them with the flour. So here you join me where I am now rubbing the fats into the flour and making the actual pastry. And this is the method that you can use to make crumbles or anything where you have to rub fat into a flour and essentially make it into a breadcrumb texture before you add any liquids. Now the easy way of doing this is to put these ingredients into either a food processor or a food mixer and let a motorised engine do all the hard work. But for any reason why you haven't got one of these machines, or you just want to do it the traditional way, here's how you do it. So you just put your hands into the mixture and pull up a couple of handfuls and lift your hands out of the bowl above the actual main body of the mixture. You then want to use your thumb to rub the fats into the flour and use your thumb rubbing against the mixture onto your fingers, and that will incorporate all the fats into the flour. You need to keep doing this until there's no lumps of fat left. It can take some time depending on how good you are at it and how quickly the fat rubbed into the flour, and that will depend on how soft it is. I find that the vegetable suet does take a little bit more work to rub in, and it doesn't go down to an absolute fine breadcrumbs. You will find this mixture is a little bit gritty. As long as you've got no big lumps left in there and generally the mixture looks like breadcrumbs, you're good to go. I've been mixing this for about 10 minutes and we're almost finished, and as you can see the mixture has gone to more like a breadcrumb consistency. There's just a few lumps to get out, so just a couple more goes at mixing it through and we should be done. I've got a couple of tips for you. Tip number 1 is if you shake the bowl you will bring any of the lumps up to the surface. So when you think you're getting close to being done, just shake the bowl and any lumps will come to the surface, and it's really easy to see how much more mixing that you need to do, how much more rubbing in of the flour and the fats. Tip number 2 is make sure that you're not working with your hands stuck into the bottom of the bowl with the ingredients like this. You won't ever be able to rub the fats into the flour like this. So make sure you grab the handfuls of ingredients and lift them out of the bowl and let the flour and the mixture fall through your fingers as you rub it in. After about 10-15 minutes, you should have a breadcrumb texture, and then you want to add 185 mils of cold water. Now this bit, you're going to get a little bit sticky and messy to start off with. Just mix in the water into the flour mixture and form it into a dough. I'm just using my hand to scrunch everything together into the bowl, and then as you can see I'm turning the bowl around and repeatedly scrunching it all together until everything combines. Now tip number 3 is to add nearly all the water to start off with, mix it in and then just add the last little drop as you go along, just to make sure that you don't end up with too wet a dough. Whilst I'm forming the dough, if you're getting value from my videos, please smash the like button. It really helps my YouTube channel to grow. You can subscribe to my channel and ring the bell for notifications, and that will give you a notification for when I upload a new video. If you've got any questions, please feel free to ask. I'll always answer, and let me know in comments if you've tried this recipe and let me know how you're getting on. After about a minute of mixing, the dough really starts coming together and we're almost ready to wrap it up and put it in the fridge. Just wipe the ball of dough around the bowl, and that ensures you get all the last bits of the dough out of the bowl. And then what you need to do is just to really form it together, give it a quick knead on a hard surface like the kitchen top counter. It doesn't require kneading like a bread dough. All you're trying to do is just form everything together so it's in one piece without any of the little bits. You can see I'm just picking up with the main part of the dough any of the loose crumbs and then just pushing it together, working it backwards and forwards and making it all form into one solid mass. Here I've rolled it into a sausage shape and then folding the ends into the centre and then just rolling it out again and making it into a large ball. And then once you're happy with that, you want it a nice smooth consistency. What we need to do is wrap it in cling film and pop it into the fridge to rest. Now, short crust pastry, you need to rest it for at least 30 minutes, and that's so the gluten inside the flour can stretch and it cools the whole pastry down. So when you then go to roll it out to use it, it actually makes the whole dough easier to roll. I'm just rolling the pastry into a ball, and once I've done that, covering it in cling film and popping it into the fridge. As I said, it needs 30 minutes, so by the time you've finished chopping up all the ingredients to go into the Cornish pasties, the pastry will be nice and chilled. The next step is to prepare the mushrooms. Now we need 500 grams of mushrooms, and I've just got some ordinary large white mushrooms here. I'm going to slice the mushrooms, cutting all the way across the mushroom, and then once I've actually sliced them, I'm going to chop the slices into smaller sections. Just work all the way through all the mushrooms like that and then pop them into a bowl. To this I'm going to add 2 generous teaspoons of sea salt and just sprinkle it all over the top of the mushrooms, and then once you've added the 2 teaspoons you want to get your hands and just scrunch the salt thoroughly into all the mushrooms. The reason that I'm using salt is to remove the excess moisture that the mushrooms contain, and if you leave the moisture in the mushrooms you'll actually end up with soggy Cornish pasties, and nobody wants those. This process will take about 30 minutes, and what you want to do is give them a good squeeze a couple of times throughout that duration. Here they are after 30 minutes. You can see that they've really changed in consistency and are quite soggy. So you need to squeeze out the water. I've just done this by hand by picking up a handful of the mushrooms and giving them a good squeeze. You can see all the black liquid coming out of them. If we hadn't have salted them, all that liquid would have ended up in the Cornish pasties and, quite frankly, ruined the pastry. Make sure you keep the squeezed out liquid because that can go into a soup or into a stock or a stew. Don't waste all that delicious flavour. And if you aren't cooking anything that would require it, you can pop it into an ice cube tray and freeze it for use later. Set the mushrooms to one side and then prepare the next ingredients. Peel, chop and cube 200 grams of swede. Peel and dice 150 grams of white onion. Cube 400 grams of waxy potatoes, and you can see here I've left the skin on. These are actually homegrown Nicola potatoes. And if you're interested in growing your own potatoes, have a look at my videos where I show you how to do just that. We're going to mix the ingredients together, so in a large bowl, place the potatoes and the onions, and make sure you do grab a large bowl because when we go to mix this up, it's very hard to do it in a small bowl. It's quite a lot of ingredients. Then we add into this the swede. And for my American friends, we're not chopping up Swedish people, I promise. Swede is rutabaga. And put in the mushrooms. Then you're going to need to add seasoning. I've added some oregano. Here I've got some dried oregano picked from the garden, and I've also added in a teaspoon of ground white pepper. Once you've done that, give it all a really thorough stir. And then we're ready to assemble the pasties. I'm going to roll out the pastry on my kitchen counter, but first I'm just going to give the countertop a light dusting of flour, and that stops the pastry from sticking to the countertop. The pastry will be nice and chilled now, and I'm just going to give it a knead just to warm it up and make it pliable so it's easier to roll out. Just give it a few turns and I've rolled my pastry into a long sausage shape, and then I'm going to cut it up into equal portions. This recipe makes 6 pasties, so I'm going to actually weigh out the amount of dough divided between 6. If you've not made pasties before, weighing out the dough and cutting it into 6 portions makes it easier for you to get equal sized pasties. If you're a little bit more experienced, you might just want to do this by eye. I also divide up the filling mixture into 6 equal portions, and I found that this recipe divides into 6 1-cup portions, and you can see I'm using a cup measure and just checking on the scales to make sure they're equal weights. Now to roll out the shortcrust pastry, grab one of the portions and just roll it around into a ball shape. I'm doing this and I'm putting a little bit of downward pressure onto the dough, and that helps it to form into a ball. Lightly dust the surface that you're going to work on with flour, and that prevents the dough sticking to the countertop. And with a rolling pin with a slightly firm pressure, you want to just roll backwards and forwards and then turn the dough a quarter of a turn and roll and turn, and keep repeating that method until you get a circle shape, and you're looking at approximately 9 inches, a small dinner plate. If the dough starts to stick, lift it up and add a little bit more flour as you go along. You're aiming to have an even thickness throughout the pastry, and try and get as close to a round shape as possible. If you turn the dough a quarter turn each time, then this will make it easier to get a round shape. It takes a bit of practice. If you mess it up, don't worry, just scrunch the dough up, roll it into a ball, and then start the whole rolling process with the rolling pin again. As you can see, I occasionally turn the whole piece of pastry over, and that's just to stop the dough sticking and it also helps to prevent adding too much flour to the pastry, because we don't want to dry the pastry out with additional flour. Once you've got the pastry rolled out to the correct size and thickness, then add the filling into the very centre of the pastry. You can use your hands to just centre the filling into the middle. Then grab a pastry brush and a small amount of water, and dipping the brush into the water, just paint the water around the edge of one half of the pasty. The water helps to seal the pasty for when we put the crimp in. Lift up the pasty, and you want to put the dry edge to the wet edge, and gently press along the seam where the two halves meet, and try and keep all the contents in. If they try to escape, just poke them back in and then go back to the other end, and then flip it onto its side. Press down with your hands all around the edge, pushing the edge to seal it together, and scoop the contents of the pasty into the middle. Fold the corner in, and then we're going to put the crimp in. So you're just lifting up the edge of the pastry and pressing down, and then going along the whole edge of the pasty like so. This takes a little bit of practice. As long as the seal is functional, it doesn't have to look pretty, and the more you do this, the easier it gets. You're aiming to get the crimp something like this. Here's the folding the pasty again, a little bit closer up in a slightly different angle. So just lift the wet side of the pastry to the dry side, press all the way along, and then flip it onto its side, firm down with your hands, try and just make the difference between a lip and the contents of the pasty. I just find cupping my hands does that. Fold the corner in, and then with fingers and thumbs, the right hand is supporting the lip, and the index finger of my left hand is just lifting that lip up and over and then pressing it in. I filmed it as best as I can. It's just really difficult. But as I say, as long as you get a functional seal on the pastry, then the ingredients are going to stay inside the pastry case and you're not going to get any leaks throughout the baking process. Carefully pick up your pasties and put them onto a lined baking tray. For the glaze, we're going to do an egg and milk wash. Just break an egg into a cup, and then with a fork give it a good mix, and then I'm going to add to that about a tablespoon worth of whole milk. And once you've added that, give it a good whisk with the fork. And just make sure that the egg and milk are nicely incorporated together and it forms a smooth blended consistency. And then taking your pastry brush, dip into the egg and milk glaze or wash and just paint all over all the edges of the Cornish pasties. Now, a tip I've learnt from French patisserie chefs is that they always go around at least twice or 3 times with egg wash, and the reason is if you put a thin coat on and then leave it to soak in a little bit and then go back and add your glaze in layers, you get a much better effect. It also helps to seal in the pasty so we don't get any leaks throughout the baking process. If you're getting value from my videos, please subscribe to my channel because it really helps me to grow my YouTube channel, and ring the bell for notifications. Once you've finished with the egg wash, pop them into a preheated oven at 160 degrees Celsius for fan oven for 50 minutes. They should be golden brown and piping hot all the way through when fully baked. And here it is, fresh out of the oven, piping hot. You can still see the steam coming off it, and I can assure you they really are super tasty. Let me know if you like this recipe and how you get on in comments below. Don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe to my channel, and for now I shall be seeing you.